Within the build-up toward the Dance of the Dragons, Season 1 of House of the Dragon gave much of the spotlight to the Targaryens, the Velaryons, and the Hightowers. In any case, this left many of the Grey Houses of Westeros without a featured role. However, as the succession war kicks off in the coming season, these houses will start to play a bigger role in the Game of Thrones. Before proceeding any further, I'd like to give a warning for potential spoilers. My last video was about the houses of Stark, Arryn, Tully, and Greyjoy, all of who ally or side with Rhaenyra in some way, shape, or form. The remaining houses include House Lannister and the Baratheons of Storm's End, who both find themselves siding with Aegon, and the houses of Tyrell and Martell, who land in the neutral zone. In this video, I'll be going over the connections they had in this timeline, and their history in the years leading up to the Dance of the Dragons, all according to Fire and Blood. I'll start with House Lannister, who played an important role in helping the Hightowers install Aegon on the Iron Throne upon Viserys' death. The Lord of Casterly Rock during the Great Council was Tywin Lannister, who was most likely the father of Jason and Tywin. Tywin was once thought to be one of the most attractive men in the realm. About 21 years before the Council of 101, he was considered to be one of the leading contenders to marry the Princess Daella Targaryen. However, his reputation of indulging in women and wine is implied to have turned her away from him. Daella ended up marrying Roderick Arryn instead, and would later pass away, giving birth to their daughter Emma. Although the line of succession for House Lannister during this timeline isn't made clear, it can be assumed that sometime after being rejected by Daella, Tywin inherited Casterly Rock from his father, married, then fathered Jason and Tywin. House Lannister was a noted advocate for the claim of Prince Viserys during the Great Council. It's believed that their support factored into the decision to bring Tywin into the Small Council years later. When Rhaenyra Targaryen came of age, the Lannisters would once again try to work their way into the royal family. In the show, we saw Jason, the head of House Lannister in the current timeline, try to win over Rhaenyra to no avail. In the main canon, Tywin was also in the mix, although he failed as well. With Jason as the Lord of Casterly Rock and Tywin as the Lord Admiral and Master of Ships, the Lannisters would become a foundational piece to the Green Agenda. In the years leading up to Viserys' death, it's clear that Tywin had been conspiring with Otto Hightower, in what was most likely a group that also included Jason Lannister, Hobart Hightower, and Jasper Wilde in the show. Collectively, they were able to prepare and make arrangements to put Aegon on the Iron Throne instead of Rhaenyra. During the Green Council, Tywin reveals their long-laid plans to the rest of the lords in attendance. Part of their arrangement is to divide the crown's treasury for safekeeping. According to Archmaester Gildane, the gold would be split between the Iron Bank of Braavos, Old Town, and Casterly Rock, with the remaining amount intended to be used to prepare for war. Following the death of Lyman Beesbury, Tywin is expected to replace him as Master of Coin, although whether the show goes in the same direction remains to be seen. Even so, the allegiance of House Lannister was never really a question as the season concluded. As we head into Season 2, they'll play a major role as one of the leading forces fighting for Aegon and the Green faction. House Baratheon didn't really play a big role until the season finale, but they did make a few appearances throughout the season. The Lord of Storm's End in the opening episode is Borman Baratheon. Early on, we saw him compete in a joust and later pledge fealty to Viserys and Rhaenyra. Although he's just a minor character in House of the Dragon, he actually has quite a few connections to other important characters in the story. Bormund was the son of Rhaegar Baratheon and Alyssa Velaryon. In the early days of King Jaehaerys' reign, Rhaegar was the hand of the king, and Alyssa served as Queen Regent during the king's regency. By the time his parents got married, they had both been married once before. Rhaegar was married to an unnamed character up until her death, and Alyssa was married to the former king, Aenys Targaryen. Her first marriage resulted in many kids, including the future King Jaehaerys and his queen Alysanne, giving Bormund a direct connection to them as half-siblings. Rhaegar and Alyssa had Bormund about 49 years before the Council of 101, but they also had another child together, a daughter by the name of Jocelyn Baratheon. When Jocelyn came of age, She was betrothed to her nephew and prince, Aemon Targaryen. At the time of their betrothal, Aemon was the heir to the Iron Throne. A few years after their marriage, Jocelyn would give birth to their one and only child together, the Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, making Bormund Rhaenys' uncle on her Baratheon side. Her initial claim to the throne was largely based on the principle of primogeniture. When the line of succession was put into question following the death of Aemon, Bormund not only supported Rhaenys' claim, but he also voted in favor of Laenor's when the succession was put into question again in 101 AC. When Rhaenys was initially passed over because of her gender, Bormund was said to be furious. His feelings seemed to have carried over well into Viserys' reign, as we saw during the tourney in the opening episode, where he publicly named her the Queen Who Never Was. Following the events of the first episode, we see Bormund again when Rhaenyra was courting suitors at Storm's End. While there's no mention of this in Fire and Blood, it is a parallel to when Bormund was on the other side of things as one of the lords in contention to marry the Princess Daella Targaryen. Sometime between the events in episode 4 and the season finale, Bormund is succeeded by his son Borros, who's now the active lord of Storm's End in the current timeline. Before either side was able to make a move on the Baratheons, the Blacks were thought to be favored to win them over because of their connection through Rhaenys. However, Rhaenyra's faction failed to predict that Borros is nothing like his father, and it didn't help that the Greens were able to play their card before they were. Gildain implies that the Greens knew they were at risk of losing House Baratheon. Their solution was for Aemond to treat with Borros and marry one of his daughters, sealing a marriage pact that would bring House Baratheon back into the royal family and win their forces over to their side. Unlike his father, Borros was very much of the belief that men hold the right to inherit over women. It's also mentioned that he felt slighted by Rhaenyra for casting his house aside over the years. Lucerys was led on with the idea that his trip to Storm's End would be an easy one, when in fact he was walking into the perfect storm. Not only did Borros reject the notion of Rhaenyra's claim, but he also held a grudge against her, and it just so happened that Aemond was there to make matters worse. While Borros didn't allow their conflict to boil over under his roof, he probably could have taken a more proactive approach to make sure their confrontation didn't escalate any further. The result of their conflict was ultimately the official spark that started the war. As everything unfolds in Season 2, we're likely to see Borros and House Baratheon again. According to Archmaester Gildain, Borros marches south in the initial phases of the war to confront a wave of Dornish incursions. While it's rumored that a fear of dragons may have kept him away from the war at first, we're still likely to see him again next season. The Tyrells don't really have a big role in this timeline. During the era of King Jaehaerys, Lord Martin Tyrell served as Master of Coin for a time, although it's implied that he wasn't very sharp, and it was in fact his wife putting in most of the work. House Tyrell would later present themselves during the Council of 101, where it's implied that Mathos Tyrell sided with Viserys during the vote over the succession. When the time came for the Dance of the Dragons, their lord was in his infancy, and their house was ruled by his mother, who served as their regent. Because the Hightowers were their vassals, it was assumed that they would side with the Green faction during the war, but they decided to stay out of it altogether. However, many of their bannermen decided to get involved in the war without their leave. Because of their decision to stay neutral, it's hard to say whether we'll see House Tyrell in Season 2, although they'll probably be mentioned in passing. The Martells of Dorne wouldn't be conquered by the Targaryens until many years after the current timeline. Their history in the years prior alternates between periods of peace and war with the rest of Westeros. In any case, when Daemon was warring in the Stepstones, Prince Corran Martell was noted to have given his support to the Triarchy. Otto Hightower would later use this as a reference point when he was gathering swords and allies during the Dance of the Dragons, but his offer was rejected. Because the Martells didn't do much during this period, it's not likely that we see them in the coming season. The showrunners for House of the Dragon are bound to make some changes as they adapt the story, but I think it's likely that they stick with the alliances that are set in canon. In any case, that's it for me. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more content like this. Peace.